All right, a lot of big decisions being made from now until the first Tuesday in November for governor, for attorney general, congressional delegates. But there's a choice on the general election ballot that might be just as big when it comes to laws that will impact your day-to-day life. Do you think the Idaho legislature should be allowed to call themselves back into session? Back in 2021, lawmakers passed a resolution to ask voters that question, to amend the Constitution to give lawmakers the power to call themselves back after they adjourn, usually around March or April. In Idaho, only the governor could do that right now, as is described in the state constitution. So what will it mean to change Idaho's constitution? Here's Joe Paris.
This November, Idahoans have the chance to change the Idaho Constitution. Voters will get to decide if the Idaho legislature should gain the ability to call themselves back into session after yearly adjournment. Right now in Idaho, only the governor has the power to call lawmakers back to Boise to consider limited legislation determined by the governor's office. Assistant House Majority Leader, Republican Representative Jason Monks, supports the idea.
I think it's an important function and privilege that we should be allowed to do. I think it's a privilege that's been given to the courts. It's also been given to the governor's office. They don't really have to ask our permission or any other, one of the three branches of government to be able to do their job.
Monks believes the idea will prevent messy legislative sessions that drag on in the future.
A couple years ago, we never sine-died. The House did, and the Senate did. And so we were technically in session the entire year. That we had to do that because it was the only way to make sure that we were able to respond to COVID emergency problems that may have come up. And by allowing us to call ourselves back in, will really prevent us from being forced to be a year-round legislature, which really nobody wants.
I think we should stick with what's worked for us for 130 years and leave our Constitution alone.
House Minority Leader, Democrat Alana Rubel, says she hopes Idahoans turn the idea down.
My feeling on this is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We've been working very well for more than 130 years with the current system that we have, where the governor calls us back in when we're needed to come back in. And I'm really concerned about this proposal to have the legislature call itself back in as many times as they want.
Rubel thinks the idea as written also lacks logic.
I am fearful that it would be extensively abused. And I think the threshold isn't high enough. So right now, what they're proposing in the amendment is that 60% of the legislature would have to want to come in. Well, if you think about it, the reason they would be coming back in is probably because the governor does not want to call us back in, because the governor already can call us back in. So presumably they would be doing this because they want to do something that the governor does not want.
If lawmakers did call themselves into session and pass something that the governor did not like, he could veto it. Lawmakers would need a 2/3 veto vote to override that.
So it would seem to make sense that you would want to have at least 67% so that you could override a gubernatorial veto. Because if you're calling yourself back into session to do something that the governor is opposed to, it seems at least to not waste people's money, you should be doing that only when you have enough support to override a governor's veto.
I think it's important for us to be able to work as a legislative body. It's not necessarily about passing legislation. It's just whether or not we can get to discuss issues. We may call ourselves back in and decide, you know what, there's nothing for us to do, or the best course of action is to wait, and that's okay too. But having that conversation, I think, is critical.
And if there's a real emergency, the governor will call us back. I've been called back into plenty of special sessions. We have special sessions, when there's a reasonable cause for one. It's not like we can never have a special session other than when we're regular. It's happened routinely when it's needed, and the governor has called us back when it's needed.
It's our job to legislate, and it's our job to appropriate all the money. And so if there's funding that comes in, emergency funding for something, we need to be there to be able to appropriate that money.
So all Idahoans will get the opportunity to vote on this on their ballot, whether you go on election day or you do early voting. But Brian, it's a big question, and it's one of these things when you talk about voter turnout, when you imagine 30% is usually the big voter turnout. Everyone should get a say in this, and everyone should vote on this because it could greatly change the political landscape of our state.
Okay, let's get real for a second,
sure,
Joe, because we all know when these special sessions are called, there's a lot of discussions that we don't know about, that we're not privy to. They already come in with kind of an idea of what they're going to do. They get handed that from the governor, but there's also discussions between the governor and the legislators, several of them, to say, is this a possibility? Can we call people back and get this done? So, I mean, we're kind of already at that 60% of the legislature has to agree to come back. kind of thing, aren't we?
Yeah, kind of. And there are lawmakers, though, and not that appeared in the story, but there are lawmakers that I've spoken with that basically say, you know, back in 2020, when the COVID situation in Idaho was very serious, they felt it was unfair that the governor's office and the executive branch really unilaterally got to handle all the decisions on their own, including legislative funding and federal funding, because the legislature had already sine died. So as all this federal money started to come into the state of Idaho in the back half to 2020 and as well as in 2021, there were lawmakers who believed we should be there and we should be working on this type of information, and the governor shouldn't just do this himself. So I guess the logic behind this from some lawmakers is we want to make sure that the governor can't box us out, and if we think we should be at the legislature and 60% of us agree, then we should be able to. It's also a balance of powers thing, according to some lawmakers, saying that the executive branch, they don't need permission from the legislature or the judicial branch to go to work. Same thing from the judicial branch. They don't need the permission from the legislature or the executive branch to hear court cases. So that's the argument that in favor of it. Against it, though, there are lawmakers that say this is a bad idea. There's a lot of things that could come with this that are unintended consequences. But at the end of the day, it's not the lawmakers that get to decide. It's you at home.
Yep.
So there you go.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe.